Okay, we're live. All right. How's it going, everyone? So my name is Josh Jones, and you guys may have seen me doing some Facebook Lives or a couple other videos out there. But today we're not here to talk about discs, we're talking about stamping discs. So I've definitely helped out, and this is actually for high pressure stamps. So shout out to Ben Ramirez and Jim O'Connor from High Pressure Stamps. They've asked me to do another video because it looks like the one that we did on YouTube got taken down. So today we're going to start focusing on pretty much everything from scratch. I wanted to go over a little bit of things and just kind of highlight some of the stuff that we went over in that first video, and also maybe give a little bit better explanation on some of the things as well. So let's just jump right into it, okay? You bought a machine, hopefully from highpressurestamps.com. Ben, what he does there is he actually lubes up the piston. He makes sure that your distances are all the same. One way that he does that on the machines is using a digital caliper. For those of you guys who buy a machine, I strongly suggest that you go get one of these. This is a tool that is essential in your arsenal of things that you need to do in order to maintain and keep this running smoothly. So that's something that Ben does, and what you want to do is just use your calipers and open them up, and you'll basically want to check the distance or the height of your header, basically. And you want to make sure that from the center of that screw head, I am checking the height there, and I want to do that on all four corners. And now sometimes it gets a little awkward on this angle over here. I've had to kind of lay it down and do it like this before, hopefully when the machine is not turned on. So that is something that is really important in doing when you first get your machine, and making sure that everything is all set up and nice and tight, if you did not get that from High Pressure Stamps. From there, though, what you do need to do is make sure that you fix the height. And the adjustment on the height, what I would say is, we actually tend to use our support. I'll get to this here in a second. And I would put my disc on a support, and you'll notice that with that, there is very little room here, especially if I had a stamp inside there. And the goal is you want to have the least amount of room there possible. The reason is because you want to have your piston head, this is the piston, you want to have this go down the least amount of travel distance when it's coming down to hit your disc. Doing that will minimize the amount of pressure that your piston puts on this front plate, the face plate here. So you can actually see that this is my first one that I ever used. This one's old and been abused, and so we used it so much, and at a point in which I wasn't aware or keen to the idea of how far my piston should travel. So what I ended up doing by breaking it and having my piston travel too far, it pushed the piston towards this front faceplate, thereby making my faceplate actually bend or bow outward. And so what I did was I actually had to take the faceplate off, flip it around, and then put it back on to make it so it's actually putting pressure against the piston again. Then I lowered it, made sure that it's all set and safe and sound. So that's probably the biggest thing that could happen to your machines, so we definitely don't want that to happen. One thing that I've ended up doing is making sure that I put a zip tie around here, and again, this is my first one. It's been broken a few times. You can tell my other one's doing a little bit better. So what we definitely want to do is make sure that we take care of these machines. And so they are a tabletop machine here. These are about 200 bucks. They do come from China, and they're not necessarily made for the purpose of what we're using them for, which is to hot stamp frisbees or discs. So they typically are made for stamping leather or cloth like a napkin, cardboard, paper products like a business card, something a little bit smaller. And I believe in their advertising they advertise this as something that's stamped like bottle caps as well. So definitely a smaller size stamp. And that's why we definitely recommend staying on, whether you have the 5x7 header or you have the 10x13 header, you probably want to stick to a 2-inch stamp. If you start going bigger than a 2-inch stamp, you might have issues with dropout, or you might have issues just with placement. So that's why we recommend to stick to a 2-inch stamp, and we'll get into the stamps here in a second. There are a couple different kinds of stamps that you can get. There's a magnesium stamp. This is actually a special one we call the Super Mag. Here, I'll see if I can pull out just a normal mag stamp. Now, the problem with the magnesium stamp is magnesium is a softer metal, so over time this bolt can get a little stripped out. And after lots and lots of presses, this bolt might get stripped out and end up falling out of there. So that's when Ben over at High Pressure Stamps started working on the Super Mag stamp. This is not available on the site. You would have to request this special edition for your stamps. It ends up costing about the same as a brass, so I end up just recommending the brass stamps. In the brass stamps, what we started with was one that was a little bit thinner. I'm not gonna lie, we started getting some of these from China, and what happened was the brass is just not of the same high quality, and the bolts started to get stripped out as well. They also use a smaller bolt size in there, and so when kind of fishing around and prospecting to find a new metal supplier here in the States, that's when I found Ben and High Pressure Stamps, and I just, you know, fell in love. They have great quality of both the metal and great quality customer service. So I definitely love working with them. I recommend the crap out of High Pressure Stamps. You'll see their stickers and branding everywhere in here. So I love getting the brass now from High Pressure Stamps. You can almost, it looks gold. It looks like I could sell this and still make money on it. This thing is amazing, very, very high quality. The bolt in the back is just solid, and you know, you can tell he lines this up perfectly. And what they do is they actually use the CNC machine to back thread out the bolt. So the bolt is a single bolt add-on. It is not normally there. It's a $25 add-on for him to find the exact center, CNC back thread out, and then he also sends you with the bolt, so that way you can mount this properly into your machine. Now, if you didn't want to do the bolt mount, you can go with the bonding tape or thermo tape, which is double-sided, you know, heavy-duty tape that is good to certain degrees of heat. And you would basically just peel off. I put some on here. There's kind of two strips there, and you would peel off the other side, and then you would attach this to your header. Now, the one problem with the bonding tape, the thermo tape, is that in order to get it off, you actually have to heat your machine up. You turn the temperature up a little bit more. Once it gets a little hotter, the stamp will fall off. The other downside to it is, so you're constantly changing temperatures, which puts more stress and pressure and, you know, fluctuations on your heating coils. So realistically, what I like to do is stick to the bolt method, because the other thing that's kind of a negative about the bonding tape is that it does get a little gunky. And so you probably want to buy maybe a paint spatula, and you might have to scrape off some of the glue from time to time. So that's one reason I'm a little OCD. I kind of steered clear from that, and I preferred to go with the bolt method. And so when we do mount the bolt method, we just did a video for High Pressure Stamps where we're using a washer. I think I have the washers here. It's basically an M10 1-inch washer, and so when you would load up your stamp into the little slot there, you would actually put a washer right over this. Now what the washer does is it relieves some of that stress, the stress on the bolt or on this little slot here. So realistically, it won't actually kind of start to wear into the slot. And I have had that happen on my first machine where I wasn't aware of the washer, and so the nut, that when you screw on the bolt with the nut here, the nut actually started to, with so much pressure and pushes, started to wear into the groove of that little slot channel that we load our bolts up into. And so my slot is actually messed up, and I had to get a file and file that down. So don't be like me, and make sure you use a washer, because it's a super simple, cheap little ad that just saves you lots of time and money in the long run. Okay, so we talked a little bit about stamps. We talked about the machine. We have other videos out there that get into the setup. We've talked a little bit about temperature in other videos, where basically on premium plastic, you probably want to stick to like a 171, maybe 172. And on the base plastic, you know, 165 to 168. You know, here's the thing, guys, is every plastic manufacturer has a different formulation and a different mix on their discs. So I have seen that some base plastics might end up using a little bit lower temp. I've gone as low as 150 before. Keep in mind these temperatures are in Celsius. So I think at 172, 174, that's right around 350 degrees. And 350 degrees is what we're using on the big machine to get our full stamps. So 350 is kind of your guide number for temperature. But like I said, each plastic is different, and so you just kind of want to find that magic number. It does take a little guess, test, and revise, folks. So hot stamping is like the #1 thing to teach you how to be a good troubleshooter. So hot stamping is fun, and it could be very, very fun, but realistically, you know, you do have to trial and error, you know, some of the things in order to get it to work out. So we have a base plastic here, so we basically would be rocking about 165 to 168. In our plastic, we use a little bit extra rubber, so we can take a little bit hotter temperature in order to get it to adhere fully. And so also, some of the foils have different adhesion temperatures. And so we'll get into the foils here in a moment. So we talked a little bit about the stamps, talked a little bit about the machine, temperatures, etc., distance. I have some other videos out there about tips and tricks. I'll put some links into the to the description. We talked about some of the tools, having your caliper. You know, you want to make sure you have the right wrenches for your actual bolt sizes. You may also use wrenches for anything else on here. And you also want to make sure that you have the right size Allen head. The Allen wrenches are key in regards to tightening or adjusting any of your bolt sizes or heads. If you do need to adjust the distance here, if you need to change where your handle is. I actually change where my handle is because I don't like having my handle too far forward, because when I come down there's a potential to hit my hand on the table. So what I've done is I've actually placed or positioned my handle a little bit further back, as you can see here, than the one that's angled a little forward. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. I'll do another video about that later. It does require you to take off the faceplate and gently hold the piston while you rotate the handle. So we'll do another video about that. And so yeah, tools, essential tools, having the Allen wrenches, the calipers, got to have your scissors to cut the foil. But then also having something like this. This is my sandpaper, and this is electro-coated abrasive paper, CW 2500. I do use this quite a bit, as you can see. And now what I do with this is because I also have other issues where I have some people that come in and they will sometimes use my machines without me either being around or watching. And so what can happen is sometimes there could be a little buildup where maybe they pushed a little too hard into their plastic and they now have some plastic in their stamp. Maybe they also put the foil in upside down and they actually got the foil stuck inside of the stamp. And so what you would do is, on a hard flat surface like my workbench here, you would take your stamp and you would have it, you know, push very firmly down and just drag it across, then spin it, drag it across, spin it, drag it across, and so forth. And what you'll notice is after a while it's going to start to take off any little bits of foil that may have been stuck on there or any little bits of plastic. Worst case scenario as well, I have used you know, an air spray can to spray out any other bigger chunks of plastic if that happens. This is a perfect example of what could happen if pressed too hard, and this you can actually see the plastic has just been burned into the stamp. And I started to sand this one down with the sandpaper here, and you can see it's just slowly coming off of the L there. So you can fix them, okay? You can get them fixed. The only thing that probably would be detrimental is if you did strip out the back, and that's again why we go with the thick brass, because that's going to be a very least likely to happen scenario. Okay, so your other big tool, painter's tape. We love the painter's tape. Painter's tape keeps everything together, keeps everything on there. We use a lot of painter's tape in order to fix dropouts, etc. You can see we even use the painter's tape to dress some of our mounts here. So we'll quickly go over the mounts. I have a couple different sizes of mounts. You can see I have you know, one for a mini, like a 3-inch normal mini. I have our acorn size, it's about 1.5 inches maybe across. So you can see those little different sizes. And then I have my normal one, which I had to sand down a little bit. That's why there's a flat edge, because drivers also come in different shapes and sizes. So typically a Nova, for example, has a much smaller diameter than some of our own brands. So, and that also equates into total weight of the disc. So like I think a Nova can only go up to 175 grams on most of their drivers, and that's because the diameter, the inside diameter of the disc is a little bit smaller than ours. So our Cedar, for example, has a much wider inside diameter, and we can go up to I think 176 point something, which essentially is 177. So I had to make an adjustment and make sure that this could fit any and all manufacturers. So I sanded this down a little bit, but you can see the 3 sizes that I commonly use. And then I do have an even bigger one, which we kind of keep for mid-ranges. Now, I'm not suggesting that every single person out there needs to do this, but what I'm trying to explain is the fact that when you cut your support to the exact size of your disc, that's when you're going to get your best stamp. Now that is exactly why certain brands are able to do XXL stamps, where they can get the stamp all the way to the full side edge of the disc. They also have a high tonnage for their stamp machine. Most common large stamp machines that you'll see are going to be 1 ton, 3 ton, 5 ton amounts of pressure, 5 tonnage of pressure. I have seen other bigger brands I know that have a 10 ton, a 40 ton. I mean, you can stamp a freaking skateboard at that point. So you can get to the edges of every single disc at that point. So we have here is a 5 ton. This is about $20,000 machine with all the bells and whistles and packing and shipping and getting it to you. So that's why starting on a $200 tabletop machine is definitely a good way to go to start learning the basics, which, you know, realistically, when you're starting to mess with hot stamping, it's heat, it's time, and it's pressure. Those are your 3 big variables, and all the other stuff is troubleshooting, guys, and you can figure it out, I'm sure. You guys are some fart smellers, right? Some smart fellers. I'm just kidding. There's a dad joke for you. Okay, so we went over the sizes on those, and you know, I think we've talked a little bit about these in videos where, what do we have underneath, Josh? We have some of these heat mats. So you could buy these on Amazon. These are, you know, basic, you know, silicone heat mats. We try to do 2 layers, but I do keep a 3rd little layer as a backup. So if I have a disc that's super domey, and you're having trouble getting the stamp to stamp because of the dome on the Frisbee, you actually can maybe add another layer. I've folded it, and you know, I've added a couple layers, you know, to make sure that you're basically balancing or leveling out the stamping area. And that's key in order to get a good stamp. Like I said, guys, troubleshooting, okay? So having a little backup sheet is great. Now the only problem is if you were stamping and let's say your Frisbee was like this and you're coming down with the stamp like that, half on, half off, you're definitely going to have some dropout where this does not meet. So you would want to make sure you cover it. Or you could cut a piece that covers your entire nest. I did not do that. This is just a little piece of leftover, which I obviously use and I've used for many years now and haven't had any issues. So this is the one I typically use the most because it does fit on every single disc, driver, mid, putter, etc. I might just have to move the disc around. So if you had the stamp area up here, you know, you might just have to slide your support or nest up to make sure that when you're stamping there, it is fully supported. Okay? Okay, so let's get into the foil. We said we were going to do that a little bit ago. Now, in regards to the foil, guys, there's a couple different types of foil out there. I tried to bring a couple examples out here. We obviously have our very popular and famous ones, the Money foil and the Wonder Bread foil. Now when you grab these, the thickness on this, I would assimilate this to, you know, holding like a construction paper in your hand and then holding like a regular piece of printer paper in your hand and then holding something like tissue paper in your hand. And so the thickest foil that we have is probably the Money foil, the Wonder Bread, and some of the other brand you know, that we carry. They're very thick, and typically the thick foils work best on premium plastic. I have had very little luck in regards to the thick foils working on a base plastic. Now in smaller stamps, like 2 inches and smaller, you can get away with using a thicker foil on the base plastic. It's just, I've noticed on the large machines, it's really hard to get 5 inches of pressure all the way across on a full-size stamp using the thick foils. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. There are the big 3 variables, heat, time, and pressure. And so if you play with those 3 variables, you sometimes can find the right answer in order to get that disc stamped with thick foil on a base plastic. So I'm not saying it's impossible. What I am saying is that it's highly likely that you're going to get better results by sticking to a thinner foil. And this foil is almost tissue paper foil thickness. Is very, very thin, you know, to the point where I could actually scratch foil off. You can see that now. There's a little hole there because I scratched it with my fingernail. I could not do that on the Wonder Bread or the Money foil. I just can't. That foil is too thick. Now we've done some videos about foil thickness and the types of foil out there. The metallized foil on top of a mylar adhesion layers. So there's actually a couple of layers that go in. And then there's different makes as well where they do almost like a paint style. They call it a matte foil. And so the matte foils are great, but usually they're the best results with a matte foil comes from you using that as like a top layer. So if you did a double stamp or a triple stamp registration stamps, using the matte foil as your top layer works great. Now it doesn't work as well if you did a matte and then a metallic foil. That's when you might start to run into some issues of dropout as well, because the metallic foil won't stick to the matte, but the matte will stick to the metallic. I know. So I've had to learn some of these variables and the equations to figure out which ones work and which ones don't. But again, typically on a 2-inch or smaller stamp, pretty much all of the foils work if you're just doing a single solid stamp. Okay, so in regards to that, we talked a little bit about the temperature, right? So we wanted to keep like 165 to 168 for the baselines. That is definitely open to discussion and negotiation. Like I said, some other brands may have some plastic that requires you to either go with a little bit lower temp, and also you may have some that require you to go a little bit hotter temp. Now, where that comes into play is that thickness of foil. If you had a thicker foil, typically you can go a little bit hotter because it's thicker, it can take it, and it won't give you that embossing or kind of burning into your disc effect. Whereas sometimes the thinner ones, you might have to be a little quicker on your pull time, right? So that time is one of the 3 variables, and how long you hold it down. Because that's one of the big things. You can push it down hard, or you could push it down fast, or you could push it down hard and hold it there long as well. And the longer you hold it, you're going to be searing into the plastic. So if you're going in higher temperatures, you may want to think about being a little quicker unless you have a thicker foil. So that, like I said, guys, there's a lot of variables that go into finding that perfect equation of what's going to work on that exact plastic. And that is why I have a tester disc. So I test out on the plastic before I do a customer's disc. And I have a couple customer orders over here that came in yesterday. So we're going to go ahead and stamp those up today. Not necessarily on camera, but we'll do those later for the customer so I can focus and give 100% of the attention to that customer. And so what I will do is do a tester on here, and it gets kind of crowded sometimes, but you'll always know, and you can see where your stamp lands, and you'll know where the dropout areas are and how you can address them, or if you need to address them. And so one of the last things I wanted to talk about was, just having your proper setup. Having a workbench, something solid, guys, is key, because you are going to be pushing down and putting a lot of pressure onto your table, to your stamp machine, and onto your Frisbee, essentially. So if you don't have that, I have a folding table back here, which is totally fine. It's a 4-foot folding table. But what I did do was build this kind of skid from an old shelf, and it has some rubber feet on there. And then I have this little stainless steel 1-foot square, 1-foot stainless steel sheet metal. And what I do with this is, the stamp is in there hot right now. If the stamp, was hot and I take this out, I would just go ahead and put it on here. That way it doesn't burn into my plastic, and it also doesn't burn my nice wood table. I have actually done that before, and you can see an old stamp that left its mark. So having that is key in regards to taking off your hot stamps. As you can see, yesterday I was doing quite a bit of stamps on the smaller machine, so I went through many different stamps in order to do the change outs. So when stamping, you want to give yourself one good second, like 1 Mississippi, and we'll do an example here. We'll set this up here. I'll grab my tester, and I believe the team stamp is in there right now. So we'll do a little tester. What I like to do, guys, is, we already talked about how we would put the nest or support or base. This thing has a couple different names: nest, support, base. We'll slide that exactly where we want to stamp, our kind of landing zone. And that's going to be right here over this green tree area. So we're going to slide this in. Now what I typically do is, I am not stamping yet. I bring this down with just one finger, and I want to line it up. This is where you can take your time and precision and make sure you get it exactly where you want it to be. I want it to be right over those letters. We're going to take a small piece of foil. The crackles, by the way, always work. They're great. The crackles are one of my favorite ones. They work on premium, base plastic, you name it. Okay. And then when you are stamping, you want to hold your left hand very firm on the machine so it doesn't have any pullback or resistance. And then you come down in 1 Mississippi. 1 Mississippi. Nice solid push. There's my extra little heat mat there. And then so just a quick foil peel reveal, and it came out perfect. So you know, you don't have to be slow or quick with the foil peel reveal. You know, you can just rip it off. You don't have to wait any time. It's pretty much set, ready to go as soon as you know, have done that stamp. And yeah, that came out really, really nice and clean. No dropout at all. I've done that a few times, and we did test it before. So, all right, guys. Any other questions? You guys, please feel free to reach out to me, either Facebook or Instagram, as well as reaching out to High Pressure Stamps on email. His email is highpressurestamps@gmail.com, and then there's Jim at highpressurestamps.com as well. So there's Ben or Jim over at High Pressure Stamps. And High Pressure Stamps right now, guys, they're selling the machines, they're selling the base plates or supports or nests, whatever you want to call it. He sells the stamps in every shape and size, plus all the different add-ons. He has all the different foils, and there's many different you know, cuts. There's 400 foot, there's 200 foot. You know, he has pre-cut sizes as well. So if you guys have any questions, please go reach out to High Pressure Stamps. They've been great with all my stamping efforts over the last 3 years. So we love High Pressure Stamps, and yeah, hopefully you guys do too. Okay, thanks again.